White passenger demands. Black woman be moved. Entire plane sides with her. They say that what happens in the sky stays in the sky until, of course, the whole world finds out. On a flight from John F. Kennedy International Airport to Los Angeles, tensions between two strangers explode into a confrontation no one could have anticipated. A white passenger, brimming with unwarranted entitlement, demands that a young black woman be moved from her rightful seat. As flight attendants scramble to smooth over the conflict, the entire cabin transforms into an arena of moral judgment and unity. But little does everyone know, beneath this shocking encounter lies a web of secrets destined to shake every passenger's world. Mina Lewis couldn't contain her excitement as she arrived at John F. Kennedy International Airport, often simply called JFK, ready to embark on her cross-country flight to Los Angeles. She'd visited New York for a work conference and managed to wedge in some well-deserved personal time, seeing the city's most iconic landmarks, the Statue of Liberty, Central Park, even a quick tour of the United Nations building. The trip had been fruitful, but hectic. Now she was looking forward to nothing more than sitting back in her seat and letting Delta Airlines carry her to the opposite coast, where a promising job interview awaited. Her seat 14A was a window seat courtesy of her own precise planning. Mina loved looking out at the changing skyline as the plane ascended into the clouds, allowing her mind to wander. She also took some pleasure in anticipating the in-flight entertainment. There was an exciting new documentary that she'd queued on her phone, and Delta's Wi-Fi services would allow her to do some last-minute reading on the company she hoped to join. Dressed in a simple yet elegant black turtleneck, comfortable jeans and ankle boots, Mina radiated professionalism and calm. At 28, she was a rising star in her field cybersecurity consultancy, earning the respect of clients and colleagues alike for her keen insights and impeccable ethical standards. Like most travelers, Mina kept one ear on the announcements while she boarded. Delta Airlines employees guided passengers in the usual friendly manner, reminding everyone to have their boarding passes ready. Despite the hustle and bustle, Mina sensed something unusual in the air, an intangible tension that made her wonder if there had been a delay or a change in flight plans. But the gate agent's smile was unwavering as she scanned Mina's ticket, welcoming her aboard. As Mina walked down the narrow aisle to seat 14A, she noticed that the overhead bins were already starting to fill. She was used to traveling light, so all she carried was a carry-on backpack easily tucked under the seat in front of her. People shuffled around, stowing luggage, trading small talk, and jockeying for position. A mother struggled to calm her crying toddler. A middle-aged couple argued quietly over seat assignments. Typical airplane chaos. Mina finally found her seat, did a quick check for cleanliness, and settled in with a soft sigh. The window next to her revealed a runway teeming with airport vehicles and other planes preparing for takeoff. Gazing out, Mina imagined the hush that would fall over the cabin once the engines roared and the tires lifted from the ground. But before she could fully immerse herself in this daydream, she was startled by a loud voice from behind her. "Excuse me," came the sharp bark cutting through the cabin chatter like a dagger. Everyone in the vicinity paused, eyes flicking upward to see who had spoken. The voice belonged to a tall, broad-shouldered man, mid-40s, Mina guessed wearing khaki pants and an expensive-looking sport coat. He had close-cropped blonde hair and piercing blue eyes that carried a sharpness capable of freezing even the busiest flight attendant in place. The lines on his forehead spoke of a perpetual frown, as though the world never met his standard of correctness. Draped over his right arm was a garment bag, likely containing a suit, while in his left hand He clutched a battered leather briefcase. "Could you move, please?" His tone was exasperated, as if Mina were standing in his personal hallway at home rather than occupying the seat she had paid for. For a moment, Mina was confused. "I'm sorry," she responded politely, turning in her seat to meet his gaze. "You're in my seat," he snapped. "I need the window seat." He glanced at his boarding pass and then flicked it upward in Mina's direction, as though proof of ownership. Several heads turned. The middle-aged couple who had just settled across the aisle looked on anxiously, as if bracing for an argument they wanted no part in. Mina glanced at his boarding pass out of curiosity. She caught the seat assignment printed there, 14B, not 14A. Her immediate assumption was that this might be a misunderstanding. "Actually, your seat is 14B. This is 14A. Mina replied, keeping her voice steady and calm. "I specifically requested the window seat for this flight." The man's eyebrows shot up, as though her words carried personal offense. "Yes, but I need the window seat," he insisted. "I have a sensitive stomach and need to look outside to keep from feeling nauseous." His voice dripped with entitlement, ignoring all the social niceties usually present in these negotiations. Passengers sometimes asked politely if they could exchange seats, offering legitimate reasons like traveling with family or having severe anxiety. Mina was used to the concept, but no mention of a compromise or an apology was forthcoming from this man. Something about his glacial stare and demanding tone unsettled Mina. "I'm sorry to hear about your stomach issues," she replied, "but I also specifically chose the window seat. Maybe we can ask the flight attendant if there's another window seat available." In her mind, Mina kept calm, but her guard was raised. She had encountered microaggressions before, and though she hoped this was just a rude traveler, there was a hint of hostility in his eyes that made her suspect otherwise. He shifted impatiently, scanning the overhead bins for a place to stow his garment bag. "I'm not moving to another row. I want this seat," he practically hissed. By now, a few passengers had paused their own seat-finding endeavors to watch. The flight attendant, a petite woman named Clarissa, as indicated by her name tag, approached with an apologetic smile. "Is there anything I can help with?" she asked, bright and diplomatic. She gave Mina a gentle smile, then turned to the towering man. "Sir, is there an issue with your seat assignment?" "She's in my seat," he said, jabbing a thumb in Mina's direction. "I have 14B, but I need the window. I can't sit in an aisle seat. It's not acceptable." Clarissa studied his boarding pass, then Mina's. "Sir, your boarding pass clearly says 14B. This passenger is assigned 14A. Perhaps you can take your seat for now, and I'll see if I can locate another open window seat. The flight's nearly full, but I'll do my best." He let out a frustrated breath and checked around, noticing that the overhead bins were getting cramped. "Fine," he muttered. He hoisted his garment bag up forcibly, shoved another passenger's carry-on to make space, and stuffed the garment bag in. As he settled into 14B, Mina noticed him glaring at her with an intensity that felt uncomfortable. Within minutes, he leaned over and quietly said, "This flight is 5.5 hours. I can't believe you're going to make us both miserable just so you can look out the window. You people are always so selfish." Mina's heart skipped. She turned her head slowly, meeting his gaze. "Excuse me," she whispered back. He merely rolled his eyes and looked away. But Mina had caught the undertone, the ugly insinuation that "you people" was no casual phrase. She'd been around enough to know precisely what that meant. She took a deep breath, deciding not to escalate for now, especially since the flight wasn't yet off the ground. Still, her nerves tingled with dread. Clarissa returned to inform him that the flight was indeed fully booked with no other window seats available. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, "but it looks like 14B is the only seat we have open in this area. Would you be willing to switch with someone in the back? I can check with them. It might be a window seat." She offered a professional yet hopeful smile, clearly hoping to diffuse the tension. "No, that's not good enough," he shot back. "I want this seat right here." He jabbed a finger at Mina's armrest. Mina could feel the wave of stares intensify around them. The plane was filling up, and overhead announcements were already asking everyone to clear the aisle. A second flight attendant, Chris, a tall man with a calm demeanor, approached to see what was going on. "I'm sorry," Mina said politely, addressing Chris as well. "I paid for this seat in advance. I have an important flight ahead of me." Chris nodded sympathetically. "Of course, ma'am. This gentleman may have to make do with 14B, or we can see if we can arrange a seat further in the back." His voice was firm, yet understanding a sign that Mina had an ally in him. The man exhaled, glaring first at Chris, then Mina. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "I'll stay here, for now." Then he turned his attention to Mina one last time. "You'll regret this." He spat in a voice low enough that only she could hear it. The word sent a chill through Mina. She refused to let her composure slip, though. She secured her seatbelt, steeled her posture, and watched the flight attendants as they began the pre-flight safety demonstration. She could only hope that once they were in the air, the man's anger would subside. But something told her this was only the beginning. Little did she know how right that intuition would be. As the airplane taxied onto the runway, Mina noticed the man in 14B, the rude passenger who'd introduced himself in the worst way possible, shift uncomfortably. He muttered under his breath about incompetent airlines and unaccommodating seatmates taking occasional sideways glances at Mina. She tried to ignore him, distracting herself by looking out the window at the ground crew waving signals to the pilot. Seconds later, the plane's engines roared to life, and the cabin vibrated with the surge of power that accompanied takeoff. Passengers braced against their seats. Some clenched armrests, and Mina felt the familiar thrill of acceleration that always came with leaving the runway. She closed her eyes for a moment, reminding herself this would be a new chapter. After all, this trip to Los Angeles carried the promise of a career leap that could change her life. The flight reached cruising altitude smoothly enough, but Mina could still sense the tension radiating from seat 14B. Once the seatbelt sign pinged off, Clarissa and Chris began moving through the aisles offering beverages. Mina requested an orange juice. The man next to her asked brusquely for ginger ale, and "Make it quick," he snapped, prompting Chris to raise an eyebrow, but say nothing else. Flight attendants were used to dealing with difficult passengers. As Mina sipped her orange juice, she noticed the man rummaging through his briefcase, pulling out a laptop. The screen flicked on, and Mina glimpsed spreadsheets or charts, some kind of business data, it seemed. She tried to tune him out and immersed herself in her own reading material. An article on the newest developments in cybersecurity, specifically referencing real-life data breaches that had occurred within major corporations like Equifax. Mina had consulted for smaller firms in the past, but she hoped to tackle big-league clients soon. About 20 minutes into the flight, Mina felt a light tap on her shoulder. She turned only to see the man leaning closer than she'd prefer. What she said, her tone neutral, but laced with caution. "I'm going to need more elbow room," he declared. "I'm working on important documents, and you're crowding me." Mina felt her jaw tighten. She wasn't leaning into his space. In fact, she was angled toward the window. "I'm not crowding you," she pointed out, Glancing down to confirm that she wasn't crossing into his seat area, he gave her a dismissive look. "Just be mindful," he said curtly. Then, in a passive-aggressive show, he nudged his elbow further into her territory. Mina shifted slightly, swallowing her frustration. She reminded herself that losing her cool could escalate things, and that might cause more trouble than it was worth. A few rows ahead, Mina saw Clarissa offering snacks, peanuts, pretzels, or cookies. The cabin lighting was dimmed slightly for comfort. Passengers near them seemed to have relaxed into in-flight routines, reading, watching movies, or chatting quietly with seatmates. But Mina noticed at least 1 or 2 pairs of eyes flick her way every so often, as if the entire section remained on edge after the pre-flight drama. Sure enough, Mina's instincts were validated when the man let out an audible sigh. "It's bad enough I couldn't get the window seat," he muttered, though loud enough for Mina to hear. "Now I'm being cramped by some rude—" He caught himself, perhaps aware that finishing that sentence with anything blatantly racist would draw attention, but Mina felt the weight of his insinuation all the same. In that moment, Mina realized she had a choice: either quietly endure this hostility for the next 5 hours, or attempt to address the problem. Part of her was tempted to call for Clarissa or Chris again, but a small voice inside her insisted that maybe it would be better not to feed the fire. Still, the man's behavior felt like a ticking bomb. She could sense that it would only worsen unless nipped in the bud. As Mina contemplated her options, a different passenger rose from seat 14C, the aisle seat just across from Mina, and approached Clarissa whispering something. Mina guessed they were complaining about the tension in the row. Clarissa nodded and shot a concerned glance in Mina's direction. Moments later, Clarissa gently touched Mina's arm. "Ma'am, could I speak with you in the aisle for just a moment?" she asked quietly. Mina unbuckled and stood. The man took the opportunity to spread out further in his seat elbow on Mina's armrest, as though it was now permanently his domain. She followed Clarissa a few steps away from her row near the galley. She noticed that some passengers were watching them. Curiosity piqued. "I'm so sorry to bother you," Clarissa said softly. "I just wanted to check in and see if everything is okay." Another passenger mentioned there was some tension. "We want to make sure you're comfortable." Mina considered what to say. "He's been making comments," she admitted, her voice quiet. "He insists he needed the window seat and has been calling me rude, hinting that I should give him more space. He also made some remarks that felt discriminatory." Clarissa's brow furrowed in concern. "I see. We definitely don't want you to feel uncomfortable. If he's harassing you, we can intervene. Let me talk to him. And if you feel unsafe or threatened at any point, you let me or Chris know immediately." "Okay." Mina nodded. "I appreciate that." Clarissa paused, eyeing Mina's seat, as though gauging whether to suggest a reassignment. "We're fully booked, as I mentioned, but I'll check if maybe a colleague can swap seats with him. Our staff sometimes can make these adjustments to keep the peace." That might help, Mina said, though she doubted the man would voluntarily move to a middle or even a window seat in the back, especially after his big show of entitlement. Still, Mina felt thankful that at least the flight crew was on her side. Clarissa excused herself and moved toward 14B. Mina lingered near the galley, not wanting to overhear every word, but catching fragments of the conversation. "Sir, I understand your concern. Completely unacceptable that I can't have a window seat. We've done everything we can, but this passenger is within her rights to remain where she's assigned." Mina heard his voice rising, though still subdued enough not to cause a full-scale ruckus. She found herself wishing the flight could be over already. What should have been a simple ride was turning into an ordeal of stress. Eventually, Clarissa waved Mina back to her seat. "He's agreed to, at least for the time being, remain civil," she whispered, trying to keep it positive. But Mina could read the look in Clarissa's eyes. It was an uneasy truce at best. Mina returned to 14A, carefully sitting down and buckling up again. She avoided eye contact with the man, whose face was red, a vein in his temple throbbing with pent-up aggression. If Mina had to guess, she'd say he was the type of man used to always getting what he wanted. Someone who'd never had to negotiate or compromise for anything in life. She turned her gaze to the window, forcing her mind onto more pleasant subjects. She let herself think of the job interview awaiting her in Los Angeles, the potential new life she might start there. She remembered the supportive phone call from her mother that morning, cheering her on from their family home in Atlanta. Her mother's warmth and resilience was Mina's biggest inspiration. Just as Mina felt her pulse settle, she heard him mumble again. "The worst part is she doesn't even deserve it." Mina stiffened. He seemed to be talking to himself, or maybe to Mina under his breath, but it was definitely an insult meant for her ears. She inhaled slowly, counting to 5 in her head, then exhaled. Silence was sometimes the best armor. Despite her attempts at self-control, Mina was grateful when Chris eventually came down the aisle with snack carts and gave her a discreet nod, as though to reassure her, "We've got your back." But as the flight progressed, Mina couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was brewing, a deeper confrontation. Little did she know, events would soon spiral in ways no one on that plane could have foreseen. 2 hours into the flight, Mina tried to find some peace. She put in her earbuds and tuned into a jazz playlist that always calmed her nerves. Outside the window, the plane soared above a sea of clouds, illuminated by a brilliant midday sun. It would be a few more hours before they descended into Los Angeles. She managed to drift into a light sleep, lulled by the plane's gentle hum. In her dreamlike state, she envisioned her future in Los Angeles, a new condo near the coastline, morning jogs along the beach, and a fulfilling career where her talents were finally recognized. Mina had been cautious in her optimism, but it felt like good things were on the horizon. Her daydream crashed abruptly when she sensed movement next to her. She opened her eyes to see 14B rummaging through the seat pocket in front of Mina's seat. Confused and slightly alarmed, Mina pulled out her earbuds. "What are you doing?" He didn't even look at her. "I'm looking for the in-flight magazine. They never put enough in the seat pockets. And I'm not waiting for the flight attendants," he said dismissively. His hand lingered in Mina's pocket area, rummaging next to her legs. She recoiled, feeling that he was way too close. "Please don't reach into my seat area," Mina said, firmly, pulling the seat pocket away from his grip. "That's my space, and you're invading my privacy." He scowled at her, as though she'd committed an offense by demanding personal boundaries. "You're so dramatic," he muttered. "It's just a magazine." Mina clenched her jaw, holding back an urge to lash out. She recognized that anything she said might escalate the conflict. Instead, she pressed the flight attendant call button. Within seconds, Chris appeared wearing a calm but concerned expression. "Everything all right here?" Mina explained how the man had reached into her seat pocket. "I'm not comfortable with him invading my space," she concluded, trying to keep her composure. The man let out an exasperated sigh. "I just wanted to read something," he insisted. "Stop making this a bigger deal than it is." Chris assessed the situation, his gaze flicking between Mina's tense posture and the man's dismissive attitude. "Sir, We have plenty of in-flight magazines near the front galley. I can get you one in no time if you request it politely, Chris said evenly. Also, please respect other passengers' personal space. That's non-negotiable. The man folded his arms. Fine, he barked. Just bring me the magazine. His cheeks colored slightly, as if embarrassed by the reprimand. Chris nodded left briefly and returned with the glossy publication. With that crisis settled for the moment, Chris quietly asked Mina if she wanted to move to another seat. She shook her head. If there's a way to swap so he's not next to me, I'd appreciate it, but I do not want to lose my window seat. Chris nodded sympathetically. I understand. Unfortunately, we're fully booked and there's no window seat left. But let me see if there's a seat in another row at least. I'll get back to you. He strolled away, no doubt, investigating the flight manifest. Mina watched him go, wondering if maybe the simplest solution would be to find a middle seat or an aisle seat just to escape her seatmate's hostility. But Mina bristled at the thought of giving up what she'd rightfully booked. It felt unfair. Suddenly a voice from across the aisle spoke up, an older woman with grey hair and kind eyes. Honey, if you need to switch seats just for a bit to get away from him, I'd be happy to sit where you are for a while. It's not a window seat, but if it helps you relax, I'm just reading my novel. Mina appreciated the offer. That's so kind of you. I'll keep that in mind if things get worse, she replied with a grateful smile. In that brief exchange, Mina felt a surge of solidarity from at least some of the passengers around her. The man in 14B seemed to hear the conversation. He snorted. Classic. Everyone coddles her, he muttered. I'm the one who's inconvenienced here. Remember. Before Mina could reply, an unexpected shift took place in the plane's atmosphere. A mild jolt, likely turbulence, but it was just enough to shake the overhead compartments. Passengers gasped. Mina gripped her armrests. She noticed Clarissa quickly making an announcement about fastening seatbelts, but the turbulence wasn't the real disruption. At that moment, the man's phone, which he'd been gripping in his left hand, lit up, and Mina happened to glance at the screen. She couldn't help but read the message that popped up. We have a problem. The investors want their money back. If we don't respond immediately, legal action is next. Her seatmate's face darkened as he read the message. He quickly angled the phone away, but not before Mina noticed the name of the sender, Elizabeth Legal Dept. Mina didn't mean to pry, but the tension practically radiated from him. He stuffed the phone back into his pocket, muttering curses under his breath. What Mina didn't realize was that this man, whose name was apparently Todd Hastings, she caught a glimpse of his name on the phone's notification, was not just an entitled traveler. He was in some kind of legal or financial trouble. That knowledge pricked Mina's curiosity, though she had no intention of meddling in his affairs. She was far more concerned with simply surviving this flight. The turbulence subsided, and the seatbelt sign blinked off again. Clarissa and Chris resumed their duties, though Mina could tell they were keeping an eye on row 14. Mina tried to refocus on her reading material, but the tension in the air was palpable. She couldn't shake the feeling that Todd's meltdown over the seat was the symptom of something bigger unraveling in his life. Perhaps he was projecting his anger at being cornered financially onto her. As if reading Mina's thoughts, Todd twisted in his seat to face her. "Don't stare at my phone again," he snarled, keeping his voice low to avoid drawing more attention than he already had. "I'm dealing with sensitive business, and I don't need some nosy seatmate eavesdropping." Mina's temper flared. "I wasn't eavesdropping," she said through clenched teeth. "Your screen was practically in my face." He seemed poised to retort. But before he could, Clarissa's voice came over the intercom, announcing that due to strong headwinds, the flight might be arriving in Los Angeles about 30 minutes late. A few groans arose from passengers, but Mina welcomed anything that shifted the cabin's focus away from their dispute. Todd leaned back in his seat, silent for a moment, as if grappling with his own thoughts. Mina turned to watch a child in the row ahead who was giggling at the in-flight movie. That simple, joyful sound reminded Mina that not everyone on this flight was embroiled in tension. Suddenly, Todd's phone buzzed again, and he huffed in frustration, quickly reading the text. Mina heard him mutter, "They better not file that lawsuit," under his breath, but she pretended not to notice. The last thing she wanted was to invite another confrontation. Just as Mina managed to steady her nerves, the pilot's voice came on the intercom, instructing flight attendants to prepare for potential turbulence as they crossed a jet stream. Mina sighed, bracing herself. A heavy sense of foreboding washed over her. Something told her that the flight's physical turbulence would pale in comparison to the storm swirling inside row 14. Despite the tension, time marched on, and Mina was determined not to let Todd Hastings ruin her entire flight. She decided to accept the older woman's offer to swap seats for just a short respite. As soon as Clarissa gave the okay to move about the cabin, Mina stood and carefully maneuvered around Todd's knees, ignoring the pointed glare he gave her. In the aisle seat across the older woman, Deborah Clarkson smiled warmly. "Come, child. Sit here for a bit. You can use my seat for some peace, even if it's just temporary," she offered. Mina thanked Deborah and settled into the aisle seat, which wasn't particularly comfortable for someone who loved window seats, but it was a mental break from Todd's close proximity. Deborah quietly introduced herself as a retired school teacher on her way to visit grandkids in California. She had a gentle spirit, the kind Mina found instantly comforting. "I saw how that man was treating you," Deborah said softly, leaning in so as not to be overheard. "Some people are just full of bitterness. Don't you let him steal your light." Touched by Deborah's concern, Mina offered a small smile. "Thank you. Honestly, I just want this flight to end without more drama." Deborah nodded. "It will. But remember, honey, you have every right to stand up for yourself." Meanwhile, Mina peeked over at Todd, who seemed engrossed in furious texting on his phone. His face was a mix of anxiety and anger, as though he was fighting multiple battles at once. That reaffirmed Mina's suspicion that he wasn't just an everyday jerk. Something was happening in his life, something significant and stressful. But that hardly justified his racism and entitlement. As the plane hummed steadily, Mina let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. For a few minutes, she engaged in light conversation with Deborah, learning more about the older woman's life as a teacher and her love for telling stories to children. The conversation was a soothing balm for Mina's rattled nerves. Suddenly, from behind them, Mina heard a distinct voice. "Is that Mina Lewis?" She turned to see a face she recognized from the cybersecurity conference, Marcus Fielding, an IT specialist who had been on a panel with her. He was seated a few rows back on the other side. Mina's eyes widened. "Marcus, small world," she exclaimed. She'd had no idea he was on the same flight. Marcus was known for his quick wit and thorough expertise in encrypted networks, and Mina had admired his work from afar. They engaged in a brief conversation across the seats. Marcus explained he was heading to Los Angeles for another conference, and Mina mentioned her upcoming interview, though she kept details vague. Marcus offered words of encouragement. "Listen, you wowed everyone in New York. "I'm sure you'll do great in LA," he said. That affirmation was another boost to Mina's spirits. Deborah, enthralled by the coincidence, found it delightful that Mina had run into a colleague. Funny how life brings people together, Deborah mused. Mina nodded, grateful for these small pockets of kindness. A few minutes later, Chris gently approached. "Ma'am, we can't have you swapping seats for an extended time because of safety protocols, but if you'd like, you can remain here for a while longer. Just be sure that if we hit turbulence, you return to your assigned seat with a seat belt fastened." His tone was friendly yet firm on the rules. Mina nodded. "Thank you, Chris. I'll go back shortly." She glanced over at Todd, who was still hunched over his phone, occasionally glaring at Mina's empty window seat. The flight was calmer now, at least on the surface. She returned to chatting with Deborah and Marcus for about 20 minutes. It was a reprieve from the tension. Nonetheless, Mina knew she couldn't avoid her own seat forever. After finishing a cup of water offered by Chris, she decided to head back. When she slid into seat 14A again, Todd lowered his phone, eyeing her warily. "Your new best friends now, huh?" He sneered in reference to her little chat across the aisle. "I'm allowed to talk to whomever I want," Mina replied evenly. He shrugged, returning his attention to his phone. A few minutes passed in silence before he spoke again, this time more quietly. "What's so important that you have to sit at the window?" he asked, his voice laced with bitterness. "Is it some flight tradition of yours?" Mina was taken aback that he'd even attempt a conversation. "I like the window seat, that's all," she said, not wanting to go into more detail. But he persisted. "People usually give up seats if someone has a medical condition," he pressed. "I told you about my motion sickness, and you still refused. So you're not exactly a good Samaritan." Mina found herself getting annoyed. "You never asked politely or offered a fair trade. You just demanded." He gave a humorless laugh. "Demanded? Maybe I should have used better words. But that's not the point." He fell silent, drumming his fingers on his armrest in agitation. Then, in a voice thick with an unspoken weight, he mumbled, "I'm just having a really bad day." Mina blinked, wondering if this was his version of an apology, or if it was more manipulative behavior. She decided to at least keep the conversation civil. "We all have bad days," she murmured. "Doesn't give you an excuse to take it out on strangers." Todd stiffened. "Spare me the lecture. I don't need pity, especially from you." And that was the end of that. Mina exhaled slowly, turning back to her own devices. She noticed her battery was running low. Reaching under the seat, she retrieved her backpack, pulling out a small portable charger. Her laptop was in there too, loaded with notes for her upcoming interview. She contemplated doing some last-minute prep, but the tension made it hard to concentrate. As she fiddled with her charging cable, Mina felt Todd's gaze again. She glanced at him from the corner of her eye, noticing that his phone had died, or perhaps he'd turned it off in frustration. His posture was slumped, as if the energy drained from him. For an odd moment, Mina felt a sliver of empathy. Everyone fights secret battles, she told herself, but that empathy quickly vanished when she recalled his racist undertones and rude behavior. Around them, the flight continued uneventfully. Passengers dozed off, watched movies, or devoured the snacks available. Chris walked by regularly, offering water or checking seatbelts whenever there was a hint of turbulence. Clarissa busied herself with the first-class cabin, but occasionally passed through, smiling politely at Mina, as if to silently ask, "Everything okay?" Halfway through the flight, Mina decided to stretch her legs and head to the restroom. She stood up, letting Todd shift to the side. The cramped airplane bathroom offered no real solace, but Mina used the time to take a few steadying breaths. Gazing at her reflection in the mirror, she reminded herself that this was almost over. She'd land in Los Angeles, hopefully leave Todd in the dust, and move on with her life. When she returned to her seat, Mina found Todd rummaging again, this time in his own carry-on bag. He seemed to be searching desperately for something. "Where is it?" he muttered. Mina sat down quietly, but curiosity piqued. She watched him tug out a stack of documents, secured with a binder clip, and shuffle through them. He cursed under his breath. Then, in a sudden movement, he shoved the papers back into his bag with a frustrated grunt. "Everything okay?" Mina asked before she could stop herself. She felt a bit silly for inquiring. He'd done nothing to deserve her sympathy. Todd froze, surprised by her question. For a moment, Mina saw vulnerability flicker in his eyes. "Nothing's okay," he said in a low voice. But he offered no further explanation. Mina decided not to pry. Instead, she turned on her phone's music playlist again, letting the soft chords of a piano piece fill her ears. The conversation was over, or so she thought. Minutes later, Todd leaned closer. "You know what the problem with people like you is?" he asked, voice hushed but menacing. Mina stiffened, a knot of dread forming in her chest. "You pretend to be all righteous, but you're really just looking for ways to put people like me down." Mina's hand tightened into a fist at her side. She stared straight ahead, refusing to engage. Todd continued. "It's always about your rights, your seat, your everything." Deborah across the aisle caught Mina's eye and shook her head silently, telling her not to dignify Todd's remarks with a response. Mina inhaled deeply and let the fury settle. She wouldn't let his bigotry ruin her. But Mina sensed that Todd was nearing some sort of breaking point, and it wouldn't be quiet when he snapped. An hour later, Mina was 3/4 through the flight exhaustion setting in from the constant emotional toll. She considered reading a novel on her phone, but her mind was too restless. Todd's presence loomed like a dark cloud overshadowing every attempt at relaxation. At one point, Todd got up abruptly and headed to the restroom himself. Mina exhaled in relief, savoring the brief moment without him beside her. She watched him stomp down the aisle, shoulders tense as if carrying the weight of a world he despised. Marcus happened to walk by, taking the chance to quickly lean down and whisper, "Hang in there. The flight's almost over." Mina mustered a grateful smile. When Todd returned, he was on the phone, clearly making an in-flight call, using the Wi-Fi service, which was allowed for texting or internet-based calls, though not always recommended. His voice, though low, carried an edge. Passengers glanced his way, annoyed that he was speaking so loudly. Mina tried to ignore him, but certain words stuck out legal ramifications. Deadline, contract breach. Then came something more ominous. "I don't care what it takes. We do not let them walk away with that money. I'll bury them if I have to." Mina's heart gave a small lurch at the severity of that statement. She looked away, but her mind spun, piecing together the puzzle. Todd was likely in some high-stakes business deal, one that was crumbling, fueling his rage. At that moment, Chris approached Todd. "Sir, if you're making a call, please be mindful of volume," he reminded gently. Todd waved Chris off dismissively, ending the call anyway. Seconds later, Todd slumped into his seat, massaging his temples. "This is a nightmare," he muttered to himself. Mina nearly felt sorry for him, nearly. Then she recalled his hateful comments, and her sympathy evaporated. Without warning, Todd turned to Mina. "You. What's your name?" he demanded. Mina hesitated, uncertain if she should answer. He noticed her reluctance and rolled his eyes. Whatever. You're too high and mighty to even share a name. Mina bristled. I don't think my name is any of your business. He scoffed. Figures. Listen, he began, as if forcibly lowering his pride. You can have this seat. Obviously, you do. But I want to get off this plane as soon as we land. I need to be first to disembark. I have an urgent meeting. So when the time comes, don't block me. Move aside, or you'll regret it. That was an absurd demand passengers typically deplane row by row, unless it was an emergency. Mina's eyebrows shot up. I'm not blocking you from anything, she said. We're all leaving the plane when it's safe to do so. He narrowed his eyes. Then remember what I said. With that, he turned away, jostling Mina's arm in the process. This new confrontation rattled Mina more than she cared to admit. Todd was clearly unraveling, and his threats were becoming less subtle. She caught Clarissa's eye a few rows away. The flight attendant appeared concerned, possibly debating whether to intervene again. Mina tried to convey with a small shake of her head that she was okay for the moment. But Mina felt anything but okay. She recalled multiple stories of air rage incidents, how quickly they could escalate. The last thing she wanted was a full-blown altercation at 35,000 feet. She considered asking for more decisive action, like having Todd moved or even restrained if necessary. But so far, his behavior, while aggressive, wasn't at the level of physically assaultive. Mina told herself to focus on staying calm. They had maybe 2 hours left before landing in Los Angeles. Eventually, the cabin lights dimmed again for passengers wanting to rest. Mina tried to distract herself by scrolling through social media on her phone. She liked a few pictures from friends, responded to a couple of messages, and tried to check emails. But Todd's aura of hostility was suffocating. Just as Mina began to relax, she felt Todd shift abruptly. She glanced sideways to see him leaning closer, eyes burning with intensity. "Why did you have to sit next to me?" he whispered, voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Of all the seats on this flight, I get stuck next to you." Mina's pulse quickened, but she spoke quietly. "I didn't choose to sit next to you. This was the seat I booked. It's not personal." He let out a hollow laugh. "Maybe it's not, but it feels like the universe is testing me." His hands clenched into fists. "Everything's gone wrong. My business is collapsing. My associates are threatening lawsuits, and now I'm stuck here forced to stare at clouds I can't reach." His tone cracked, revealing raw desperation. In a surprising moment of honesty, Mina asked, "What line of business are you in?" Todd hesitated, then admitted, "Venture capital. Investments, startups. I funded some big projects, and one of them is going under. Now the investors want their money back, as if that's even possible at this stage. They think they can strong-arm me, but I won't let them." Anger flashed in his eyes. "I've put everything into this. I can't let it fail." Mina nodded slowly. She had no desire to counsel him, but she could recognize the strain of someone whose empire was on the brink of ruin. For a moment, a truce hovered between them, a fragile acknowledgement that they were both human beings in complicated situations. But Mina didn't trust it to last. Sure enough, Todd's expression hardened again. "None of that matters to you. I don't expect you to care. I just want you to stay out of my way." With that, Mina turned to stare out the window. The plane was nearing mountainous terrain, possibly the southwestern desert region, judging by the changing landscape. She told herself again that soon this would be over. But fate had a different plan. Just as Mina thought she might ride out the rest of the flight in uneasy silence, Todd's phone buzzed once more. He snatched it up, read a new text, and let out a guttural growl. "That's it," he hissed, drawing stairs. Mina felt the cabin's collective attention shift. He turned, practically lunging toward Mina. "Move," he demanded, gesturing for her to stand so he could exit the row. Startled, Mina unbuckled and quickly let him pass. He marched down the aisle, heading toward the front of the plane with an air of desperation. Passengers murmured, scanning Mina for clues. She shrugged, equally confused. After a minute or two, Todd returned, but behind him was the head flight attendant, an older man with an air of authority, wearing a name tag that read, Lawrence. Lawrence's expression was stern as he followed Todd back to row 14. "What's going on here?" Lawrence asked, arms folded. Todd pointed an accusing finger at Mina. "She's been harassing me, refusing to let me have a seat that I need for medical reasons. I'm done. I want her moved." A ripple of shock passed among the nearby passengers. Mina stood, stepping into the aisle. "That's not true," she said, trying to keep her voice steady but firm. "He's the one who's been harassing me. I booked the window seat. There's no reason for me to move." Lawrence held up a hand, scanning the faces around him. "Let's calm down. I've heard bits and pieces from Clarissa and Chris, but I need the full story." Nearby passengers began offering their accounts all at once. "That man's been rude to her from the start." He demanded her seat before takeoff. "She's done nothing wrong." Todd's face turned red. "They're all biased. Look at them ganging up on me," he spat. Lawrence frowned. "Sir, if you have a medical condition, you should have informed the airline beforehand and arranged a specific seat. Since you did not, I'm afraid we cannot forcibly remove another passenger from her assigned seat." Todd glared. "So you're taking her side?" Lawrence maintained his composure. "I'm taking the side of protocol and fairness. Now, if you can't remain calm, I'll have no choice but to report this incident to the pilot and potentially law enforcement upon landing." A collective hush fell over the cabin. Mina felt her heart pound. She didn't want to be part of any confrontation involving law enforcement, but Todd's hostility was dangerously close to crossing the line. Todd studied Lawrence's face, then the watchful eyes of nearly everyone in the section. The tension was palpable. Finally, Todd let out a bitter laugh. "Fine. If that's how it's going to be, I'll stay in my seat." He turned to Mina. "But don't expect me to pretend like you're not the reason my day's getting worse." A wave of murmured disapproval passed through the cabin. A tall passenger, a few rows back, wearing a Lakers cap, spoke up loudly. "Leave the lady alone. She's done nothing but mind her seat." Others chimed in with nods and words of agreement. Todd's lips tightened into a thin line. He sank into seat 14B, refusing to look at anyone. Mina noticed the trembling in his hands. Part of her believed he was near a breaking point, but she also felt a sense of relief that the rest of the passengers and flight crew were clearly on her side. Lawrence turned to Mina. "Ma'am, if you feel unsafe at any point, let us know immediately. For now, please both remain in your assigned seats. We'll be landing in approximately 90 minutes." Mina nodded, grateful for Lawrence's firm stance. She settled back into 14A, while the entire row felt as tense as a drawn bowstring. Todd crossed his arms and stared at the seat back in front of him. The hush eventually gave way to muted conversation as passengers returned to their books, movies, or attempts at sleep. For the next half hour, Mina tried to focus on her phone, reading a motivational article about overcoming obstacles. She found an irony in that moment, reading about perseverance while literally stuck beside a living obstacle. From time to time, she could feel Todd's glare, but he said nothing. Then, unexpectedly, Mina heard Todd mumble. "This is all her fault," under his breath. She braced herself, but to her surprise, it was not Mina who responded. It was Deborah from across the aisle. "Son," Deborah said firmly, voice tinged with grandmotherly authority. "You need to cool down and reflect on your own actions. You came onto this plane rude as could be. You haven't said a kind word to anyone, and now you want to blame that young woman for your attitude." She shook her head. "No, you should apologize." Todd's jaw dropped at the audacity of being scolded like a child. "Stay out of this, Grandma," he snapped. A nearby passenger gasped. "Hey, what's your tone?" another added. "Have some respect." Deborah remained unruffled. "I'll forgive the insult if you just think about what you've done. That's all." Todd clenched his fists. "You people," he started again, but the entire cabin tensed, sensing a racist remark looming. Then he exhaled sharply, biting back his words. Perhaps he realized that the entire plane was against him. Or maybe he was aware that one more bigoted comment would mean an escort from the authorities upon landing. Mina appreciated Deborah's courage, but silently hoped Todd would just remain silent. Tension could only escalate so much before it exploded. But in a strange twist, Todd fell quiet, turning his gaze out the window, the very window Mina had insisted on keeping. She glanced at him, wondering if he recognized the irony. Possibly he was just resentful. A sense of solidarity spread among the passengers in Mina's immediate vicinity. A few offered her reassuring smiles or thumbs-up signs. Marcus gave her a wink from his seat, silently communicating, "We got your back." Mina felt a swell of gratitude, though exhaustion weighed heavily on her. The flight entered another brief patch of turbulence, prompting the seatbelt sign to flash on. Clarissa reminded everyone to remain seated, which effectively locked Mina and Todd side by side. Mina tried to concentrate on her music again, but her thoughts churned. She replayed the entire ordeal, Todd's initial demand, the "you people," remarks, the threats to move aside upon landing. It was all so surreal, like a bizarre moral lesson unfolding in real time. Yet Mina felt a subtle shift. Todd, cornered by his own behavior, had lost the sympathy of anyone on the plane. He had become a villain in a cautionary tale, and Mina realized with some irony that she had become the sympathetic character, a reluctant heroine who hadn't asked for this conflict. She wondered if Todd felt shame, or if he was beyond it. As the plane leveled out once more, Mina allowed herself a fleeting hope that the worst was behind them. But fate wasn't done teaching Todd Hastings and everyone else a lesson in consequences. The final hour of the flight found Mina torn between relief at nearing Los Angeles and anxiety over deplaning with Todd. He'd grown silent, seething in his seat, occasionally darting frustrated glances her way. Just as the pilot announced their descent, Todd's phone lit up again. His brief exchange was tense and clipped. They froze the accounts. "Are you kidding me?" The desperation in his voice made nearby passengers turn their heads. Mina watched him end the call and slump forward, as if the last thread holding him together had snapped. "You don't know what it's like working your entire life for something and having it crash," he muttered at her voice, trembling. Though Mina felt a pang of empathy, the echo of his earlier threats kept her guarded. Moments later, as the plane's wheels hit the runway, Todd unbuckled his seatbelt and bolted upright, ignoring the glaring seatbelt sign. His sudden movement sent gasps rippling through the cabin. Flight attendants rushed to restrain him, shouting for him to sit down until the aircraft finished its rollout. In his manic state, Todd struggled, screaming that he needed to get off first, that his life was falling apart. The plane finally slowed, taxiing toward the gate. Passengers looked on in disbelief as Todd fought against the flight crew, unwilling to follow instructions. When the jet came to a complete stop, the door opened to reveal airport police waiting in the jet bridge. Mina stood back as they escorted Todd out, the hum of whispered judgment following him. In those final moments, Mina felt both a tremor of pity and the satisfaction of seeing justice served. Todd had pinned his frustrations on her, but life and his own actions had dealt him a crushing blow. Stepping off the plane, Mina drew a deep, liberating breath. The flight had been long and fraught, but she walked away wiser, her faith in unity reaffirmed by the many strangers who'd shown her kindness and support. Thank you for journeying with us through this intense airborne drama. From the moment the seats were assigned, it seemed certain that conflict would follow Mina and Todd on their long flight. Yet amid the tension, discrimination and stress, we witnessed acts of kindness from strangers and resolute fairness from a dedicated flight crew. In the face of bigotry, compassion and unity emerged, proving that when we stand together, justice prevails even at 35,000 feet. If you found this story gripping, enlightening, or emotionally stirring, we invite you to become part of our storytelling community. Please like this video to show your support, share it with friends who enjoy unforgettable tales of real-life justice, and subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories that dive into human conflict, growth, and triumph. Your support helps us continue bringing these narratives to life. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.